Our scripture lesson is from Matthew 2, 1 through 12. That's Matthew, the second chapter, and the first 12 verses. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star in the east and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and learned from them the exact time that the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen in the east, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. The Feast of Epiphany started in the Eastern Church in honor of the baptism of Jesus. It was introduced in the West in the 4th century, where it came to be associated with the visit of the Magi. Epiphany is January 6th, and in some parts of the world, families wait to exchange gifts till January 6th instead of Christmas Day, because Epiphany celebrates the coming of the wise men and the gifts they brought. For a while, the Western Church celebrated Christmas on December 25th, and the Eastern Church celebrated it on January 6th. The Armenian Church still observes January 6th as Christmas Day. So there's some facts about Epiphany for you. But today we're talking about the wise men. And the devotion of the wise men is so impressive to me. When they saw something they interpreted as a sign of the birth of a king, they journeyed to Jerusalem in search of this king child. Now, there's some debate about whether it was a star or a conjunction of the planets Jupiter and Saturn, or a supernova or a comet, but that's not what really matters. What matters is that they followed it. They were not Jews, they did not have the scriptures, but they saw something that led them to search for a new king. They followed that star, or whatever it was. And that star is a symbol of all of our need for divine revelation to see the Messiah and King. One commentator says, without divine revelation, we would miss the Messiah. Often the overt commercialism and consumerist orientation of Christmas threaten to blind us to the real meaning of the coming of the Messiah. Because we are almost blinded by the culture, the star is a sign, a wonder, a revelation, a guidepost, a traffic light, a tracking device, and a global positioning system that brings us to the point and place of divine revelation about the Messiah. In order to understand the true meaning of Christmas, we too must follow the star. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem, the star of Christ appeared in the east. The Magi saw the star, or whatever it technically was, and using it as a tracking device, they came to Jerusalem and asked Herod, "Where is the one born the King of the Jews?" They had seen his star in the east and had come to worship. Herod was disturbed and called together his chief priests and scribes and asked them where the Christ was to be born. The reply is in Bethlehem of Judea. So Herod called the Magi in secretly, asking them the exact time that the star appeared, and then sent them to Bethlehem, telling them to search for the child, and when they found him, to send a report back to Herod so he could come and pay homage to them too. But that's not what he really wanted to do, as we know. This passage in the Gospel of Matthew shows Matthew's ability to quote or echo the Hebrew scriptures in order to connect the Old Testament law and prophecy to the person of Jesus, who is shown to be the Messiah. God's revelation to Joseph in dreams guides Matthew's story, reminding us that the Old Testament Joseph was a dreamer. Pharaoh killed the Israelite children. Herod killed the children of Bethlehem. Moses led Israel out of Egypt. Jesus was taken to Egypt and then to the Promised Land. Balak, king of Moab, was summoned from the east, he summoned from the east a seer named Balaam to put a curse on Moses. But instead of cursing Moses, Balaam blessed him. Balaam was a non-Israelite and a practitioner of magical arts, or magus. This action was understood as a prophecy of the coming of King David. And then later, Isaiah would prophesy about one of David's descendants when he said, "The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them light has shined. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given." And Matthew realized that the fulfillment of these words was the birth of Jesus. And the wise men are also called magi, the plural of magus. They are magicians or astrologers, just like Balaam. They also came from the east, like Balaam. But the biggest reason to me why it's important that the wise men came from the east is that it was from foreign lands that these men came, recognizing that Jesus would be a deliverer for all nations. He would fulfill the covenant with Abraham, which promised that in him all the peoples of the earth would be blessed. The wise men came from the east and they followed that star, or whatever it was. But perhaps the most important part of the story is what they did once they found Jesus. They paid him homage. The word in Greek is proskuneo, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong. But the important thing is that this word in Greek was primarily used to describe the custom of prostrating oneself at the feet of a king. The physical posture dramatically expressed the idea of giving not just gifts, but our entire selves to Christ. Paying homage to Christ is the whole reason that the wise men followed that star in search of a new king. They worshipped him, which means they humbled their hearts. Then they gave him gifts. They gave him gifts, but it wasn't a political move like world leaders meeting and exchanging gifts. And they weren't doing it to try to control Jesus or to gain anything. They humbled themselves and bowed down and gave him gifts of precious goods. They worshipped him. They gave themselves utterly and completely to him first, and then they offered him the physical gifts of gold, myrrh, and frankincense. Gold was precious, worthy of a king. Frankincense was incense worthy of a divinity. And myrrh was a spice used in burials. So the gifts were appropriate for one who is a king, a god, and a suffering redeemer. Commentators say that these gifts could also symbolize what our response should be to Christ. Gold is virtue or good deeds. Incense is worship or prayer. And myrrh is suffering and sacrifice. Then the star faded after the wise men reached the Christ child. This was because they didn't need it anymore. It first appeared in the east to guide them like a GPS. Its function was to bring them to the point of divine revelation. One commentator says that once you see the divine revelation, then you do not need the star, because the external power of the star goes internal. Once the wise men saw the child, they had an inflamed heart and incensed memory. The star faded because it had completed its task, and the power of the revelation was now on the inside. When we follow the star to the Christ child, our hearts are inflamed because of the divine revelation. We have been visited by the Messiah, and our memories are illumined because we cannot forget what we have seen. Just think about what you have seen Christ do in your life and in the lives of your family members and loved ones or people you know. He's reunited families. He's broken the chains of addiction. He's healed people from depression and physical ailments and so many things. And most importantly, he's brought salvation. But we can't forget that. We can't forget all that he has done. Now, the wise men were foreigners and pagans, and yet they went in search of Jesus. The question is, why didn't the chief priests and the scribes, the religious leaders of the people, not go with them? Did they not take the promises of Scripture seriously? Were they unwilling to journey with foreigners? We don't know, but it's important that we don't make that same mistake. Because today we too need to follow the star to the Messiah and pay him homage. We need to offer our gifts to Jesus. We need to offer ourselves to Jesus. We follow the star to the Christ child and behold the Messiah. And then, after we have been overjoyed, we must bow down, humble our hearts, worship, and give him gifts. How do we do this? Practically. Well, we can do this by doing good deeds, such as feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, visiting the sick and imprisoned. We can do this by using our time and talents and treasures to help others, to help the least of these. We can do this by going to church and spending time in worship outside of church as well. Setting up a daily practice of some sort is not a bad idea. Spend some time with God every day in the Word and prayer and meditation. And when we do these things, it doesn't mean our life is going to be a cakewalk. In fact, it probably won't be. It will require true commitment and sacrifice. We might have to suffer, but it's worth it. What we receive will be even greater than all we give, because we will get to be in relationship with the King of Kings and dwell in his house forever. Amen.